Well, welcome everyone to We the People's Forum. This is a brand new Braver Angels event where everyday Americans get time at the podium. It's a place where people of all races, classes, and places are sharing their stories and ideas on the issues of the day. I'm your host for today, David Lapp. I'm a co-founder of Braver Angels and director of the Working People's Project at Braver Angels. And today we're joined by two special guests to discuss a citizen's proposal to get money out of politics. And those two guests are Bill Fry. Bill, wave your hand. Bill is a Tea Party leader, retired Marine, and small businessman from Blanchester, Ohio. And he's the architect of the no ballot, no buck proposal. And he is a conservative who voted for Donald Trump. And he participated in one of the first ever Braver Angels workshops when we were just getting started in 2017. And then Rob Weidenfeld. Rob, raise your hand there. Rob is the Democratic Party district chair of Montgomery, Ohio, and he's a retired teacher. And Bill is Rob is a supporter of no ballot, no buck, and he's a liberal who voted for Joe Biden. And he also participated in one of the first ever Braver Angels workshops when we were just getting started in 2017. So what's going to happen tonight is two things. First, we're going to have a lively conversation with Bill and Rob, and then we're going to have plenty of time for a lively discussion with all of us on this forum. And during that discussion time, anyone with a question will have time to ask a question, and anyone who wants to make a comment will have time to make a comment. It'll be 1 minute for questions, 2 minutes for comments. So just two Zoom basics, and then we'll dive into the conversation. The first is that we do have our Zoom guru here tonight. Our participant manager in Braver Angels language is Apple Muncie. Apple, you want to raise your hand? There he is. And Apple, just go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Apple Muncie. I'm from Southern Indiana. I'm currently in the town of Bloomington, home of Big Red. I'm retired, ex-tool and die maker, jack of all trades, hacker, you name it. I've done it.
And Apple is a part of the team building We the People's Forum. And if you have any problems or need help on Zoom, just chat Apple, and he'll help you out. And then also during the discussion time, he'll be helping me to make sure that we're not missing anyone who's raised their hand. Apple, anything else you want to say from a Zoom perspective?
I hope we're good to go.
All right. The two things are, one is that while you're not talking, just mute yourself. So just take a moment to check that right now. If you're not muted, just mute yourself. And then the second thing is during the discussion time, if you want to ask a question or make a comment, we're going to use the raise hand feature here on Zoom. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, just test that out. Just show me that you found that. I just clicked it there, raise hand. Some of you will have used that. For others, it might be your first time working with that. But in mine, it's a raise hand function. And if you can't find that, you can always just raise your physical hand, and we'll find a way to call you. But the Zoom hand is preferred. Go ahead and lower that. Very good. But again, the first 45 minutes here is going to be a conversation with Bill and Rob. So no questions or discussion during that time. We'll have a dedicated question and discussion time about 45 minutes into this. So let's get started. All right. So Bill and Rob, welcome here. And I want to begin by asking you both about your backgrounds and your life experiences that have led you to be concerned and interested and passionate about the issue of money in politics. So Bill, let's start with you. Just to start us off, tell us about where you grew up, your family, and what you've done for a living.
All right. Well, my father was a Marine, so the first 18 years of my life was spent as a military brat, Marine brat. I don't have a hometown like most Americans. I was born in North Carolina, and then at 3 years old moved to the next base, and by the time I graduated high school, I'd been to 9 different schools overseas or Hawaii. Well, Hawaii is not overseas, it's part of America, but I actually went to school in Hawaii too. West Coast, East Coast, and even in Okinawa, Japan. So then I joined the Marine Corps and spent 20 years in the Marines and traveled all over the United States and a few other foreign countries. But so that was growing up. That was my situation. And in the military, you're not allowed to have even so much as a bumper sticker, a political bumper sticker on your car. So politics isn't something that you hear about in the military. So even growing up, you know, we didn't hear about politics. Then when I was in, I didn't. But it was 9/11. I was working at GE at the time as an engineer, and when the tower, the first airplane hit the first tower, one of the mechanics turned on a TV that he kept in his toolbox, and of course it just immediately attracted everybody over there to see what was going on. Of course, I'm supposed to keep these guys working, but we're all standing there looking at this TV screen, and then the second plane hit the tower. And immediately I said, well, that's not a mistake. I mean, I thought the first one might have been an accident. But the second one, I said, that's not a mistake. And that kind of woke me up that, you know, wow, you know, something's going on in the world, something's going on in politics. And that activated me at that particular time to actually start getting involved and with politics and see if there was something that I could do or learn or understand better. I pretty quickly realized that I wasn't a fan of the two parties. It felt like it was always choosing between Hemlock or Strychnine. And both parties seem to be willing to spend us blind. They just have different shopping lists. And so I got involved initially before the Tea Party with an organization that was called GO, and that's G, 3 O's and an H. It stood for Get Out of Our House. I became the Ohio state leader of that organization for a while. And then the Tea Party, of course, started sucking the wind out of our sails because it became a much bigger and faster growing organization. And we ended up falling by the wayside, and I joined the Tea Party. And so while I was in the well, I'm still a member of the Tea Party. But while I was in the Tea Party years later, I got introduced to, by a friend of mine actually volunteered me or voluntold me I was going to go to this Better Angels thing. She had been to the first event. So I went, and I was intrigued, but concerned because of all the problems I'd had, you know, dealing with the Democrats when I was in the Tea Party was usually a hate-love relationship. You know, I mean, it was rough. And, you know, there was a lot of accusations. And at first I thought, well, let me go see what's going to happen. And it took me a couple of meetings, 3 or 4 meetings before I felt comfortable and started to open up and talk to people. And somewhere along the line after that was when I met Rob at one of the meetings. And I'll let him talk about that evening. But so that's where I have, you know, from childhood in the military, awakened by 9/11, involved in politics. And now I'm just more interested in this particular issue that I see as being the solution to our problem. That was with GO as a process of the people selecting their congressmen, not the parties. And because, you know, I'd like to say, I just see a lot of corruption with the money involved in the two parties and how they push their candidate that they want us to have, push them through to the final election. And the money's the issue. And it's always been the issue. And it's the corrupting issue for all of our politicians. You know, it's a bribe every single time when they're getting large amounts of money. And that's when I came up with this idea about no ballot, no buck. I thought, you know, there's no way that somebody from New York should be putting money into my Ohio senator's campaign or vice versa, because their loyalty, a senator's loyalty or a congressman's loyalty is supposed to be to the people of Ohio and not to the big donors from other places, whether it's, you know, I know the left looks at the Koch brothers, the right looks at Soros, but there's so many other, I mean, it's even individual rich citizens, you know, the wealthy millionaires and billionaires putting money into politicians' pockets from a state they aren't even a resident of. And so that's what prompted me to sit down and think about how can we fix this problem? Well,
Hey, Bill, I'm going to
Yeah.
just stop you right there.
Sure.
Keep on going. The next one. I'm going to go to Rob right now. And Bill, we're getting a little bit of background noise from, I
let me
think there's
check on
folks in the
that.
other room.
Yep.
So just keep asking them, just keep it down a little bit so we can hear you. So we
All right.
can hear you, but it's just a little bit of background noise.
Okay, thanks.
Rob, tell us about yourself, your family, your where you grew up, and what you've done for a living. And Rob, go ahead and unmute yourself there.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, very good. Again, my name is Rob. I grew up, my family lived in New Jersey, and my father was a salesman. So we actually moved around a fair amount. We went from New Jersey, and then we spent a couple of years in just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And then my family moved to a suburb of Chicago. And then my family moved back to New York. And then finally they moved to Florida, to South Florida. So we were in a lot of states. I spent most of my time in New Jersey. My father was a strict Republican, and he used to tell me stories about how his father hated Franklin Roosevelt. And I'm convinced it was because my grandfather probably ran a sweatshop in New York City, and he could not stand labor unions. Meanwhile, my mother's entire family voted Democrat, loved Franklin Roosevelt, and every Democrat after them. So I guess you could say that I grew up confused. And I really didn't have a political identity. But when I was 20, and you'll be able to figure out my age pretty quickly, when I was 20, there was a Democratic convention in 1968, in which the big discussion was about continuation of the Vietnam War. And I was very much opposed to the war at that point, even though I didn't have a political identity. And I didn't like the way things were handled by Mayor Daley, the Democratic mayor of Chicago. I didn't like the fact that kids like me were being beaten up for protesting. And I said, there's no way I would, that I would vote for any Democratic nominee, except Eugene McCarthy, who that year was the peace candidate, but Hubert Humphrey was a continuation of Lyndon Johnson. So I said, there's no way I could vote. Fortunately for me, as I look back, I was 6 months too young to vote in 1968. So I was not able to vote in 68. But then a year or so later, there was another amendment to the Constitution, which created the vote for 18-year-olds. So I just missed out on voting in 68. And now as a very strong Democrat, I'm really glad I didn't vote for Richard Nixon. So, but having said that, I guess at that time, I became very interested in improving government. To me, it wasn't really a partisan issue. Even when I was working for McGovern, and I did work a lot for McGovern during that campaign, I never really identified as a Democrat because I really didn't know the difference between the parties. To me, it was just doing the right thing. I got involved right away in a group that was looking at redistricting in Ohio. And they were very concerned about gerrymandering. I studied gerrymandering a lot in the late 70s. And at the time, what of interest is the state was then controlled by Democrats. And they controlled the legislature. I think John Gilligan was the governor. And we were very concerned. We thought that gerrymandering isn't the way to go. It just didn't seem fair. I then became involved in what I thought was a nonpartisan group. I still think it was. Others may argue was called Common Cause, which is still around today, which was about, in large part, special interests and the influence that they have in elections. And because at that time, Richard Nixon had gotten a contribution from IT&T during his first campaign, which was in the amount of $400,000. And we thought that was an exorbitant amount of money. Now it's, of course, peanuts. But IT&T gave him $400,000, and Common Cause was created to try to eliminate that kind of influence. So those two issues were very important to me. But then what happened is, because of circumstances, I just began becoming more and more closely aligned with the Democratic Party. Today, I have one daughter. She's 25, and I am married for the second time. And I guess what I would say is, I recently got involved after the 2016 election. I felt really motivated, like a lot of people did, but certainly a lot of my Democratic friends did. And I decided that we were just moving. I had just been married, and I decided to get involved on I guess you could say, a corporate level into the structure of the Democratic Party. In the past, for the most part, I had just been knocking on doors. I came involved in the Democratic Party. I became a district chair of my new community for the Democratic Party. And today I'm doing more work and I'll be 73 later this month. I'm probably doing more work for the Democratic Party than I have done for much of my lifetime. So, but that's pretty much where I am today, David.
So Bill, is that Rob? So tell us the story of how you met Bill, and how your introduction to No Ballot, No Buck, and how you two met.
Okay. Well, we had it started 2017. We'd met for several months. And remember, this little tiny group of 10 to 20 people, starting in South Lebanon, or Lebanon, Ohio, was the only Better Angels group that was meeting anywhere in the country. And we were having meetings, we were getting to know each other. We were starting to feel very comfortable with each other. There was a trust level established. For a long time, David had to kind of monitor what was being said to make sure we didn't step out of bounds. And tonight, what happened is David no longer was needed.
Oh, did that change, Rob? I don't have to monitor you anymore? Is that what you're saying?
No, you're still pretty brutal, David, but you know what? We can deal with you now.
Especially with you, Rob. Yeah.
But having said that, we established a lot of good things. We were having great discussions. We were understanding. People were having these aha moments as people would share their feelings, and surprised to find that Republicans were surprised to find that Democrats felt this way, and vice versa. And but we hadn't really done anything. And there was some discussions, why don't we take up an issue? And we decided we were going to look at a number of issues that we could take up. And the only two issues that really had any traction, and we had to have like an overwhelming approval of the group, the only real issues were the ones I had actually looked at in the 70s. One was the influence of money in elections, and the other was gerrymandering or redistricting. And we were all supposed to go around the table and present our issue. I had just gotten involved in a group, which is very active right now, called Move to Amend, which is trying to create a 28th amendment to the Constitution, which will simply say that corporations are not money and that money is not free speech. So I've been involved in it. I brought some literature in. I thought this would be a good, I say, nonpartisan issue to go in. And I'm already getting ready to make my presentation. And Bill, who I maybe had met once before, got to go before me. And he started giving all the reasons why he thought money was a horrifying influence in elections. And he started using all of my talking points. And we were clearly on very different sides of the aisle. And I said, this must be the Twilight Zone. This can't really be happening. But sure enough, he went through he pretty much covered about everything I wanted to say. So I'd like to say I was speechless, but David and Bill know me better, and I wasn't. But I went ahead and we formed from that point. We formed a committee to decide whether or not what issues we would be looking at. And I think in part because Bill and I formed a very strong union and did a lot of work, that people said, let's do this. And when we finally brought it to a vote, there were actually more Democrats that were against us pursuing this than there were Republicans. But so my side of the aisle had to work on a few of our Democrats to get them on board. But we finally decided this would be the way to pursue this issue. So that's where we are with that.
So yeah, Rob, and now let's go to Bill. So Bill, no ballot, no buck. You started going into a little bit about it, but kind of take us into the details. What is no ballot, no buck? What is the idea here? What would it do? And go ahead and unmute yourself, Bill.
Okay, had to put my goggles on too. Yeah, no ballot, no buck basically means that if you do not have a ballot for a person who's running for an election for any elected office, you cannot put any money into their campaign. So money influences elections, and it changes the ballots with the dirt that's put on TV or the inflammation of issues for the emotional response and things like that, with all these commercials that come with all this money. And they can change the elections of an election they don't even have a ballot in. It's not their election, and they shouldn't be involved, and they shouldn't have a vote with their money. Is how I was, that was my concern. It's my election, my community. We should be the only ones that determine the outcome, not a bunch of money coming in from outside of our community, trying to influence the vote in a way that they want it to end. And so if you don't have a ballot for a politician, no money can go to that politician. And I would push that as far as to say, you're going to get rid of the PACs and the super PACs, because that's money trying to influence an election. Corporations, no money. They can't give any money. I believe that it should even include the two political parties, because they use the money at the party to purchase party loyalty, so that you vote the party line, not what your constituents want you to vote. And so you take all the money out of the entire election from every angle, except for the person who has a ballot, who can then put money into that campaign. Of course, there would have to be limitations. You can't have somebody who's a billionaire put $300 million into an election in their hometown because they have a ballot for it. And it sounds very simplistic, but the impact on elections would be so extreme that the common man could actually run for a campaign. It could run for an election now, because you don't need $8 million to run for Congress or $20 million to run for senator. This would allow just every single person in America who wants to be a representative to actually have a chance at doing that, and not just the wealthy or the well-connected. The average man could run for an office. So that's it in a nutshell. But to throw another card in here, through some friends that I met, some patriots that I met when my son went out to Oregon to stand with the Bundys, and I met a bunch of people out there. One of them, who is from Oregon, when I was talking to these people about the no ballot, no buck, he told me that the Oregon Constitution has that in their constitution already. It's a state constitution. It's ineffective because of the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United that money is free speech, eliminated, the effect that their constitution would have on that. But so we borrowed, ad-lib, stole, plagiarized, whatever you want to call it, modified that part of the Constitution from the Oregon Constitution to come up with our constitutional amendment. Because since the Supreme Court has said you can't make a law, this requires us to make a constitutional amendment, because making a law becomes an unconstitutional law. A constitutional amendment makes it constitutional then, that we could actually do this. And you've got a copy of that. And if there's time somewhere tonight, you could read that to everybody, what we came up with in our alliance with our group. So
yeah, we can send a copy. We can send a copy to anyone who's interested in that.
There you go.
So, Bill, where did you, did some slick consultant come up with this no ballot, no buck theme for you? Where did this idea, how did you come up with this idea?
It came out of this brain. I don't know how, but it was just something that, I know anytime you want to push an issue, you need a catchy slogan that people they'll hear it and understand it immediately. And that's what it boils down to. No ballot, you can't give a buck. If you don't have a ballot, no money could be given. So it's no ballot, no buck. So nobody.
So obviously you helped develop this idea got refined through the Brave Angels Southwest Ohio Alliance. But when did you think about this idea originally?
in my own head?
Yeah.
Well, it was, well, I'm so upset with the what I call bribes, the purchase of our candidates through big money, that we never do. The only time they are concerned with our voice is on election day, and the day after the election's over, they're on to who put the big money in their pocket, or the two parties are telling them, you vote the party line, or we don't give you the money next election that we give out. And that's why the parties can't be handing out money the same, just for the same exact reason. They're influencing our representatives, and they're forcing them to vote certain ways, or else you don't get this money. And so you've got to pull the money out of there and make it about the ballots and about the constituents, who they represent, not about their loyalty needs to be to the constituents, not to the party.
So last thing for you, and then I want to go to Rob. So you're coming at this from a conservative and Tea Party perspective.
Absolutely.
What would you say to the person who says, we got to have a smaller government, a less intrusive government, and this amendment would just put the government in running a business that shouldn't be running, would be putting its and be intruding in affairs that it shouldn't be intruding in. What would be your response to that bill?
If people think the government's intruding, they should take a look at the lobbyists and people who are putting money into the government to elect these people. That's a bigger intrusion, and it's more deadly and not deadly, but more devastating to we the people.
Rob, so you've been concerned about this issue for a while. So I guess give us any perspective on this particular proposal that you want to give, but also on the wider challenge. And what are some concerns or objections that you've heard about no ballot, no buck, and about the overall idea of addressing the role of money in politics?
I would say this, and I would borrow the thoughts of a man who passed away about 1.5 years ago, who worked with a lot with Bill Fry and I. And he used to say that you don't have to have dark money as your number one topic, but it should, no matter what your topic is, no matter what your passion is, and in terms of issues, whether it is guns or immigration or anything else, any other hot topic item you can name. He said, the fact that there's dark money out there, it impacts everything. So you may care about that major issue, but you'd be hard placed, he would say, to name an issue that doesn't involve dark money in some way. So no matter what your issue is, I would contend that if we could eliminate the money from unknown sources and the huge amounts of contributions from the political spectrum, then I think that, as Bill said, it would we would have a much purer form of a democracy. I would like to point out, for example, the corporate role in this. And by the way, when I say corporate, many people think I'm just talking about corporations, business corporations, but corporation is an all-encompassing term. It includes any entity which is not an individual. So that could be labor unions as well as it could be corporations, because they put their share of money into the corporate structure as well, and they have very large contributions. So it works both ways. But the fact of the matter is that nowhere in the Constitution does the Constitution use the word corporate or corporations. It's non-existent. And yet corporate rights, and not just since Citizens United in 2011, but corporate, or maybe it was 2010. Yeah, I think it was 2010. Corporate rights have been increasing. And the ability of corporations to usurp rights that were bequested to individuals when our framers created the Constitution has been on the increase. It just culminated with Citizens United. Frankly, this should not be a partisan issue. There are any number of states that, as Bill said, Oregon, I think Oregon leans left, and that's in their constitution. There was a movie that came out a few years ago called Dark Money. It was based on the book written called Dark Money by Jane Meyer of the, I think it was the New Yorker. And it was based in Montana, where they had very strict laws concerning who could give money to whom, and but it was entirely based on that. What happened is they tried to contest, the corporate forces worked very hard to overturn that. And with Citizens United, they were able to do that. But I was looking at recent legislation in Alabama just recently. There was a law which was challenged because Alabama had a rule that you were not allowed to shift PAC money from one PAC to another PAC. That was illegal. The reason for that was once you can start shifting money like that, you can hide the source of the donation. And see, that's probably the root of the problem. Large donations are one thing, but when the large donations are from unknown sources, you have no idea what is influencing the Congress people that you are electing, or the senators, or even the president. So that's why it's so important to open this up to the light, to let everybody see who is contributing. Some states have even adopted procedures, and they have not, I don't think any state is actually using it at this time. But what's been proposed is this, that if a certain percentage of the money that is raised by any campaign is exceeded by, let's say, if 10% or more of the contributions are coming from outside the district in which that person is running, then the election is declared, I don't want to say null and void. The person that used more than their share of outside money would then have to forfeit the election. If they lost the election, there would be consequences for using more financing than outside of your district. And when I say your district, if you're running for Congress, we're just talking about your congressional district. If you're running for the state, we're talking about the state. But it's just, and when you look at it and you start to study it, you find how overwhelming the clause are, and how the money is involved in just about every political decision that is being made. So
Rob,
yeah.
I want to ask you, so now you're coming at this as a very committed Democrat, and the no ballot, no buck proposal would say to the Democratic Party, as well as the Republican Party, and to labor unions, for instance, as Bill mentioned, that it would be limiting, it would be saying you cannot give money to a race in Ohio or anywhere. It would be really limiting their influence. So what would you say to a fellow Democrat who says, we just can't afford that? That's going to be hurting our cause.
We dealt with that, as I'm sure that's probably where your question came from. We dealt with that in our local group because some of the Democrats didn't like the idea of no ballot, no buck. And essentially, my response to them is that, you would like to be able to give $25 or $50 to your cousin who is running for Congress in another state. And yes, we might outlaw that, but bear this in mind, there's a greater good here. Large corporations, you're going to give $50 or 100. Large corporations are going to give millions or more, and they have given more. And your 25 or 50 bucks may not make a difference, but their millions will. That's peddling influence. Your 50 bucks it's not peddling influence. So in order to make this work, we may have to make the concept universal. In other words, there's a limit to how much money can come in from outside of the arena of the election. And I think when you think of it that way, for the greater good, I think that it's reasonable.
Okay. So I want to ask you, Bill, about what you both of you, and then we're going to move to Q&A and discussion. And yes, I see some of you have your hands up, as you would be first in line. So just about 5 to 10 minutes here, we'll move to discussion time. But So I know that one objection is that, well, you're just you're Bill Fry, you're Rob Weidenfeld, what difference can you make here? And so I want to ask you about what you see as the future here for ordinary citizens in addressing the role of money in politics and in campaign finance reform. One thing that I've been reading about the history of grassroots movements in America, and one movement that I was not aware of, that I became aware of, was the Townsend Movement. You can look it up afterwards, the Townsend Movement. It was during the Great Depression, and it was advocating old age revolving pension fund for every person over age 60. So this was before Social Security. And the idea was simple but radical. That you get everybody over 60 gets $200 per month. Simple. And the person who came up with the idea was just a small town doctor and a failed entrepreneur, basically, from Long Island City, California, Charles Townsend. And he was an old person, and he came up with this idea after seeing two old women scrounge for food in his trash cans. And he wrote a letter to the editor. And within 2 years, over 3,400 Townsend Plan clubs have been established all over the country. And it was a massive movement. And in fact, the movement was so successful that it's what ultimately helped to pressure Congress and FDR to establish a version of this, what we now know as Social Security. So Social Security was influenced by this very grassroots movement by the small town doctor and failed entrepreneur, Charles Townsend, and the Townsend Movement. So I guess what I would like to ask you is, so there is precedent in our country for, ordinary people helping to influence national politics like this, but it's difficult. It doesn't just happen, easily. It doesn't happen a lot even. So what would you like to see? And I'll start with you, Bill. What would you like to see happen with no ballot, no buck? And what do you see as the future for ordinary citizens in reducing the influence of money in politics?
I don't think that our present politicians would ever try to vote for a constitutional amendment that would cut off their funding. So what we need to do is to get the people to support this, like the Townsend Act. And of course, I'm sure that took a lot longer than women's suffrage, but the women's suffrage is another situation with the same way, but that took a lot longer. So I don't expect this to be a 3-year program. It's a 10 or a 20, maybe longer. I don't know, but we've got to start influencing our elections as politicians come up and say, would you support this? And if they say no, they shouldn't get our vote. And as we bring this idea out to the public and more people, then locally we should push for our state legislatures to pass that amendment within the state. And if we get 40 states to pass that legislature within the states, that puts pressure on the federal government. Exactly like you said, the Townsend Act put pressure on the federal government to pass Social Security. Then they start having to listen because some of them aren't getting reelected because we say, nope, you don't support it. You're not getting our vote. But that's kind of the battle plan, if you want to call it that, or whatever, the process as to how we would move this forward. But first, we got to educate the people to what it is and let them understand how this works and see how it can return the politicians' loyalty back to them rather than the parties or the money or the lobbyists or the industries.
Rob, how about you? What do you see as the future here for ordinary citizens, and how do you address just the tremendous obstacles that are in the way of ordinary citizens having an influence here?
Well, I mean, I'm in agreement with Bill. What I would say to you is, it's like the old line. I'm not even sure I can quote it, but it's how do you eat an elephant? And it's like, it's one bite at a time. And it's not going to be easy to eat this elephant, but because we can rest assured that politicians pretty much across the board, not all, but pretty much across the board are going to be resistant to this. It's going to have to be done through state legislatures. And that's going to involve getting 3/4 of the state legislatures in order to make a change. And that change is going to have to be making people aware or outlawing what I would call the dark money, the unknown influence, putting limits on the contributions, strict limits on the contributions. And I think once this process gets started, because the Congress may not move on its own, but once state legislatures, it becomes a tsunami. Once one state after another begins to adopt this concept, then our Congress, you develop, as Bill said, an awareness among people, and it becomes more important for them to move in this direction. I would say at this time, I know there have been bills in the Congress, there have been bills presented even in the Ohio legislature where we are that concern this topic. At this point, I would say generally, Democrats seem to be more in favor of that legislation than Republicans. I'm not sure why. If you think I'm inaccurate, I'd be happy to hear your rationale. To me, there's no reason for it. We just, we want to clean this up. We want to make these people that are elected, we don't want to be their servants. We want them to be our servants. And I'm borrowing from Bill because I've heard him say this before. And that's how we can do it. It's one bite at a time. You can start in your community. Then with your community, you can go to your state legislator and ask that person to put something on the floor. Then if you have your own community, you can speak to the community next to you. Again, as Bill said, it's one bite at a time.
Well, Rob, when you said that there's more Democrats that support this issue, it goes back to when we first met, and I said your paperwork that y'all are pushing this through, move to amend, is going to scare away the conservatives because of who was supporting it and who you had listed as supporters. And I think that's why you've probably gotten more Democrats on board through that organization than Republicans. But by neutering the politics out of this and making it purely nonpartisan, you'll get Republicans on board too. And
by the way, I do agree with Bill. And actually, that evening that we really came together and I had my literature, I thought my literature looked great. I thought it spoke to the issue. He looked at it right away and he saw some red flags. Like one of the supporters of it, I think, were the skirts for Hillary. I think that was kind of a clue. But long story short is that I agree. I agree that you have to remove any taint of partisanship from this. Now, I think it's probably even harder today than it was when we started meeting 4 years ago. But I think that's how it has to be done.
All right. Well, let's move to Q&A and discussion time. So the way this works is pretty simple. If you've got a question, take up to a minute to ask your question. If you've got a comment, you want to weigh in on the conversation, you've got an idea, or you've got some experience with this issue directly, feel free to weigh in. Take up to 2 minutes to make your comment. And I've got my timer here. I'll keep track of time. But we're going to start with Jeff, and then Josh, and then Michael, then Len. So Jeff, Josh, Michael, Len. So Jeff, go for it.
A question to Rob. Right in the middle of his eloquent opening, you mentioned a group that had influenced you, and you explained why. I've forgotten about the explained why, but I just really wanted to remember the group so I could look them up later. So somehow or another, you mentioned an influential group that propelled you.
Was it Common Cause?
You mentioned Common Cause, but I don't remember that being the group. It was something you attended. And I do have a comment about the whole great interchange I've experienced, and I'll wait my turn for that.
Okay. I think the other group I mentioned was Move to Amend, which did lead.
That's it. Move to Amend. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
So yeah, Rob, you just tell us about that for a minute. You've been involved with Move to Amend on this issue.
Yes, in fact, I was so interested in the concept that I spent a couple of years on, I guess you could say, the state steering committee for Move to Amend, and I was doing that while I was working with what was then Better Angels. Now it's Braver Angels. So, but Move to Amend very definitely had a left lean to it, because they believed that they believed in a whole lot of, I would say, progressive issues, which I went to some of their state meetings, and the Cincinnati contingent went up there and we said, we don't think we should be talking about Black Lives Matter, for example, during a Move to Amend meeting. Not that I don't support it, because I do, but I didn't feel it was the right place. We wanted to be laserly focused on money, which is what Bill is talking about.
All right. Well, let's go to Josh. Josh, you got a question or a comment?
A question. So I love this idea, and thank you both, Rob and Bill, for coming up with this idea and for putting it out here. It's fantastic. My understanding is one of the problems with money in politics is that in order for candidates to get their ideas out into the public realm, especially at the state and federal levels, they need funds to pay for advertising. So usually like television ads, but also radio, also print. And what I love about no ballot, no buck is it handles kind of the supply side of the problem. Like you're cutting off the supply of funds, but it doesn't really handle the demand side of the problem, which is that politicians need money to get their word out. And there have been a couple of ideas for handling that. And I'm just wondering what you think of these ideas. So one idea is like public campaign financing, where people who run for a particular office just automatically get a budget, they get funds from the state. Another one is, what was the other one I made a note of? Oh, that we basically, the FCC like requires television, TV channels to set aside certain amounts of money for advertising that goes free to politicians. You could do the same thing on YouTube and other large websites. So I'm wondering, what do you think about these ideas, or do you have other ideas for handling the demand side of the problem and not just the supply side? Thanks.
I'd like to start on that one. We don't need 150 television ads repeating the same thing over and over and over again every election cycle. During an election cycle, it's the same. This one candidate has so many advertisements on the radio, on the TV, anywhere they can put something out, billboards, etc. If the money's limited, then it's going to come back to social media. It's going to come back to a web page. It's going to mean people are going to have to go to the web page, and these politicians are going to have to say, this is what I stand for. This is what I stand against. It's in writing. They can't go from Cleveland saying one message to Cincinnati saying another message to Lebanon and saying another message, where they, every time you look at these people, whoever their audience is, they direct their message to that audience. Now they're going to have to direct it only to one, they only have one message. And it needs to be where they stand, what they stand for, what they stand against, what they support, what they don't support. And that doesn't take a lot of money to come up with a web page or a Facebook account or any other social media. Now, they might have to hire a couple of people to help them with some of that, but we're dealing with what the average Joe could handle also. Because if you do money, like as you were going to say, like say the state puts up so much money, you could get 500 people running for election for Congress on the Democrat side and 500 Republican side, and you'd bankrupt the state in no time at all with all these people running for these different elections. Their messaging is what they've got to work on, not money. There's ways to get the message out there, but they got to come up with a message that rings true to the people. And then they're going to be, it's in writing. We can hold them to it.
Rob, you got any
That's my
reaction to
belief on that.
You got any response to that, Rob?
My response is a variation of what Bill said. Maybe I'm old fashioned, but I think elections should be won on the basis of ideas, not on money. And as Bill said, you know what we would like to do, some might say that this concept is un-American, because why shouldn't anyone who wants to spend millions of dollars on a campaign be able to do so, because this is America? But remember, all of our rights have consequences. And sometimes you may lose a right, so someone else may have a right. Now, I don't want to think of this country as a fixed sum pie, but in some cases, and in this situation, I think that is the case. Because if we allow an unlimited amount of money, then there will be corporations which are able to, frankly, buy an election. I think what we're doing is inherently fair. We're essentially saying you're going to have a max that you can contribute to the campaign, and it can't come from elsewhere. And we don't want you deciding the election. We want the people in your district deciding the election.
It's a level playing field.
Beg pardon?
It makes it a level playing field.
Exactly. It makes it a level playing field. And to me, I think whatever small sacrifice you might think you're making because you can't contribute an unlimited amount, I think you're making the country better.
Okay, let's go to, I got Michael, Len, Liz, Chris. Michael, go ahead and unmute yourself, Michael.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I really liked what Josh suggested, and the concept of no ballot, no buck is a great move toward bringing more fairness to the election. So I appreciate what Bill and Rob have talked about tonight. But when you look at the amount of time our legislatures spend seeking funds, whether it's from just in-state or out-of-state, and I agree, what goes along with that is the massive influences that big pockets bring to that process. I really believe that public financing of elections, and it wouldn't involve 500 people running for office, because there could be criteria set up that only people who raise so many signatures or whatever, would be funded, like they've done in the past. And secondly, the other part of the problem, which you've talked about, was the gerrymandering, because it's not just the money, it's the way you set up these voting districts. And both of those have to be addressed. And it is being addressed, I think, in 8 states now, with nonpartisan commissions that set up the districts. So I like what you're both saying. It's very thought-provoking. I think we've got to move away from what we've got now with big money getting involved. And frankly, as I see it, the best way to do that is just limit it to public financing. You've got X amount of dollars, and you talk about ideas, not about the number, like Bill, you were saying, of commercials that are on TV and number of mailers that go out. I mean, it's nuts. So anyway, I appreciate this whole discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michael. Bill or Rob, any response to that?
No.
Okay, Bill, you're muted. You're muted, Bill. There you go.
There we go. Yeah, I don't, public financing, part of this is a separate part in many ways, because each state may come up with their own public financing or determine that public financing is okay in that state. And, I don't know how that would work, but to get the money out first is is step one. And then once that movement starts moving along, then there would be some fine tuning. And I wouldn't be opposed to public financing if there was some way to come up with a fair way of filtering out those 500 people. But when you've got 500 people, each with 50 signatures, then that becomes a problem, so that's something that has to be looked at. But yes, if there's a good solution there, it wouldn't bother me in the least little bit.
All right, let's go to Len, and then Liz, and then Chris. Len.
Okay, my comment is really follows on many things that have just been said. Both Bill or Rob was saying how it's hard to be it's going to be hard to pass this because, the Congress people are going to be cutting off their own funds. But maybe there's a bridge to this, and a lot of comments have been pointing to a unified computer platform that the government makes for campaigns. So, for one thing, this would be just a well-publicized platform like you have many government computer platforms like, Affordable Care, Social Security, and this is where you can contribute. If there were $7 billion total put into the last presidential election, well, 70 million voters contributing $100 each, that's 70 billion right there. So you got power in numbers. So if it's well publicized, then voters can contribute themselves in a convenient way. The same platform could show how much dark money there is going to each candidate. So that could kind of shame the candidates and show how much each candidate is getting from the people. Again, sort of shaming them and encouraging candidates to be getting their funding from the people rather than from dark money and corporate interests. So all of this could be posted on that website. And of course, while you're at it, this website could be used for issues, etc., and make campaigning a lot cheaper, for the candidates. They won't need as much money if this website were used for them
Take
to,
5 more seconds, Len.
okay, for them to display their positions.
Yeah, I believe that would be something that would be very beneficial, because that's exactly what I'm saying. When you go to social media or Facebook or web pages, something like that and shaming them. Yes, I love that idea, because that's how you change their attitude about this whole thing. And if they don't change their attitude, well, they're shamed right out of office next election.
I want to add one comment on public financing real quickly, Bill. When Obama was running, and when he was running against Hillary in 2008, I was strongly supporting him. But he did something in that campaign that really disappointed me. And that was that he decided to forego public financing. And why did he do that? Because he knew he could raise a lot more money if he didn't accept public financing. Because when you accept public financing, then you are limited in what you can accept elsewhere. And there is a limit on what you can raise. So that was a big disappointment to me, because I wanted to see, I love the concept. So I do support public financing, and I think it could work.
Let's go to Liz, Chris, and then Charles, and then Sue. So Liz, you're up.
Hi.
Unmute yourself.
Hi, I like a lot of what I'm hearing, and I must say I've contributed to Common Cause for years and years because of the ways they work to decrease the influence of PAC money on politics. The question I have is what you would do about self-funded billionaires who, they live in their district. How do you limit people buying themselves into office?
Oh, well, I think we talked about this when we were working on this, that individual contributions would be limited too.
That includes by the politician himself.
That's right.
Okay, good answer.
I agree.
Let's go to Chris. Somehow you got muted again, Chris. You unmuted and then muted.
Okay. Thank you. First off, I want to say, remind Bill and that I met you guys, and Rob, I met you guys in Missouri at the conference, and I was really drawn to your project because in Wyoming, we've been trying to do something similar. And I also am so happy that Braver Angels is putting this on, because I truly believe the millions of dollars that is spent in political advertising, the majority of which is negative, is increasing the polarization in our country. So I think it's a good fit for working on this issue. I want to throw out a couple things because our state, we had a citizens initiative that failed to get enough votes. And then twice in the legislature, we almost were able to pass it, get a call for a constitutional amendment to basically do the same thing, say money is not speech and corporations aren't people. One of the big, I'll say the resources really quick, and then I had a question that encompasses one of our big problems. A couple resources, one that is more Republican leaning is called Take Back Our Republic. So I just want to throw that out. And then there's a really good book by Jeff Clements called Corporations Are Not People. I highly recommend that because it not only shows the problems of all this money in our campaign, but also how has impacted school districts being able to restrict certain advertisements right within their, right close to their school grounds of smoking, et cetera, by corporations claiming they are people and have rights that citizens have. The biggest thing that it seems that the opposition to this in our, that we've encountered is that if you
take just 10 more seconds, Chris.
Okay, that if you limit money, then you're limiting speech. So we lose on that statement is that money is speech, and any restrictions on contributions is restricting speech. So I'm curious on how your group is addressing that one. And thanks.
Well, it's a constitutional amendment. Right now, if you restrict money because of what the Supreme Court said, it's not constitutional. And that's why this has to be a constitutional amendment. And then it becomes constitutional, and the Supreme Court cannot come out then later and say, no, that's not constitutional, because it's written in as one of our amendments to our Constitution. It's perfectly legal at that point.
And what about the argument, maybe just in terms of the arguments that citizens raise about, well, yes, you're changing the Constitution, but you're limiting speech. So we shouldn't amend the Constitution because we're limiting speech. What's your response to that argument?
Well, let me pick up on that. As I said, Move to Amend, which had its flaws because it leaned progressive. And when I say that, I'm not against progressive, obviously. I just didn't want this group to be progressive. But that group in their amendment, and similar with other groups, for example, American Promise is another organization, like Take It Back, I think Chris mentioned, or whatever that was, but
Take Back Our Republic.
Take Back Our Republic. Thank you. They have as a part of the amendment that money is not free speech. That's clearly stated within their amendment. And so I think that, yes, this is why, even if you begin the process in state legislatures, if every state legislature adopts this, which would be hard to imagine and rather lengthy, it still will not be constitutional. It will only be constitutional if it becomes an amendment, which is why getting state legislators on board is just the start.
You know, if you say money is free speech, then bribery should not be a crime.
Good point.
Let's go to Charles, Sue, and then Mary Lou, and then Nancy. Charles.
Yes, I had a question. How do you avoid somebody giving money to quote unquote friends in another state or district, and here's a gift, wink, wink, and then we both know that it's going to go to a certain candidate?
Well, I can answer that.
Sure.
Most states have election commissions. There's a federal election commission, and most states have commissions. And every dollar that goes into a campaign must be reported. And so whether or not, if you could say, well, maybe they're not going to report this, but they become then liable in a very big way should that become known. And I can tell you, it's happened here in Cincinnati many times. I'm sure it happens all over the country, where campaigns were held accountable. And right now in the news this week, a former a campaign finance manager for a congressman who's been serving in our district for something like 25 years, his campaign finance manager was just given a $200,000 fine. So there are serious consequences because these reports include every dollar you take in. In fact, I wanted to make a contribution for of $10 towards a new, I'm not even sure what it was, maybe a new fan at Democratic headquarters. I had to fill out a form in order to do it, in order to make it legal.
You know, the two political parties would be concerned that somebody from the opposite party might contribute money just to trip them up. And all you got to do is just whisper that once in a while. And I think that would keep people from doing that. They would be afraid that it was not coming from somebody who was a supporter, but it could be coming from the opposite side of the aisle as a trap.
Let's go to Sue, Mary Lou, Nancy. Sue.
Greetings. I'm not political. I've never been political. I never will be political. And I pretty much go for common sense. I think this is very common sense. And I applaud you, Bill, and you, Rob, for getting on board with this. There is a caucus on the Hill called the Problem Solvers Caucus. And each member of Congress, when they come into that group, must bring someone from the opposite party. I'm assuming that means Republicans and Democrats. So they try to keep it two-party balanced. And they look at ways to try to get things in Congress to work better. It seems to me like once you get this off the ground and once you start to get pockets going everywhere, it would be really good to introduce the idea to this group of congressmen, to have them start thinking about it. I also, it's human nature to look for holes and look for ways that things won't work. I'm all for looking for things that could work. And this is definitely something you guys have thought about for a long time, and you've got really good answers to some of the more challenging questions. There's always going to be people that are going to find ways around no matter what it is that you come up with. Back in, I can't even remember.
Take about 10 more seconds, Sue.
Oh, okay. There was a time when you could make a check mark on your income tax return to donate money towards a pocket that went for people that were running for election. I'd like to see something like that proposed again. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Mary Lou.
My question is just something I was thinking. I don't know if it would pertain or you all thought of this, but would there be any benefit to having the period of time that someone is running for an election be shorter than what we presently have in the United States? For example, Britain's elections are so much shorter, and they don't spend near the, there isn't that expenditure of money. So the time spent in elections, did that ever come up as a part of your discussions?
Yes. Here's what I would say to you, Mary Lou. Why do our elections go on so long? Because of money. That's almost always the answer. If there wasn't so much money, the election cycles wouldn't go so long. We actually toyed with the idea of putting a limit on the amount of elections, but that's probably a horse of a different color in some ways, even though you and I can see it's related.
Do you mean on the length of elections, Rob?
I think very clearly the length of elections will be a lot shorter if they don't have the money to put that kind of advertising on TV and radio.
I agree with that 100% because they're going to run out of money in a month and it can't go for 3 months. There's no money left.
Let's go to Nancy and then Lawrence and then Annette. Nancy.
Hi.
Yes, we can hear you, Nancy.
Okay. I agree with what everyone said, and I want to
applaud Mary Lou, because that's exactly what I wanted to say, was that the length of the campaigning is totally out of control, in my opinion. 2 to 3 years of campaigning is ridiculous. And I think if we were to cut it down to what she said in England, and I believe France does the same thing. If someone running for office can't say it in 6 to 8 weeks, whatever the length is, then they can't say it at all, in my opinion. And that's where the money comes in, because they have to travel all over the country. They have to have these little rallies. What I think should happen is the length of the campaign should be cut maybe down to 2 months. And then it should be strictly either TV or audio, some kind of video, and not having, and forget about all this campaigning going from state to state to state. I think having the town meetings is good, that kind of stuff, a couple of those. But I think that's what it is. I get tired of these campaign ads, these people, these flyers all over the place, whatever. I think cutting it back to a reasonable amount. And I like the idea of having a budget where each candidate gets money from the country, from the federal government, and you use that money, and that's it. But I think the main thing is the length of our campaigns are much too long. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Lawrence.
Hello. Going back to, somebody mentioned the corporations. So the question for everyone, what were the 2 big publications of 1776? Okay, the other one was the Declaration of Independence. Only kidding. Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith. So corporations, as we know them now, really did not exist at the time we were writing the Constitution and all that. I'm always remember the warning, be careful when people offer simple solutions to complex problems. So I think the discussion here really needs to go on. One reservation I have about the no ballot, no buck is Mitch McConnell affects my life. Nancy Pelosi affects people's lives. So something to address that of I'm not just voting for my own congressman or senator. The other thing is I like the ideas. I totally agree. There's too much money. We've got to get money out. It probably would shorten campaigns. I would just ask Braver Angels to maybe have a panel, a program where you have 5 or 6 or some number of panelists, each advocating a particular idea. Like I happen to like public financing or some different ideas, but I really appreciate the other participants for bringing up different ideas. So how we would do this, I would like to see that. I didn't realize this was going to be just one particular idea tonight, but thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. And yeah, your objection, what about Lawrence's concern about this? Would you restate that concern again, Lawrence, just briefly?
The one about Mitch McConnell,
right?
Effect, and I contributed to Amy McGrath's the control of the Senate affects my life. So
yeah. So the idea that Mitch McConnell affects me regardless of where he lives, Nancy Pelosi affects my life regardless of where she lives. What do you say to that, Rob and Bill?
You know what? I'm afraid that once you open that door, it's going to be tough enough to maintain. But I think once you open that door and you say, well, this person affects me and that person affects me, and that becomes very subjective. I think that, frankly, they don't get elected until after the election. And I remember when Joel Ossoff in Georgia was running for the first time, not this past election cycle when he won, But when he was running, there was a big push among Democrats all over here saying that, you know, hey, we need to get control of Georgia. Wouldn't it be great if we could get control of Georgia? And there were a lot of my friends that were contributing to the Ossoff campaign in Georgia. Frankly, I don't think we should be able to do that. And I feel the same way about Mitch McConnell. I have strong feelings about Mitch McConnell, as others may have about Nancy Pelosi. But I just, you know what, you have to draw the line for the greater good.
Yeah, you know, it really boils down to, do we want all of our politicians' loyalty to be corrupted by money? And if the answer is no, we don't want that, then I'm sorry about Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi affecting our lives, but the only reason that they're there in those positions is because the two parties put them there. And you take the money away from the parties also, and maybe these guys won't be so powerful. I mean, they'll still have a Speaker of the House and, the Senate majority leader and minority leaders. But I don't know that you're going to end up with these tyrants, as I would call them, you know, demanding that everybody in their party vote this way and follow the party line. I think that would be a problem, since they don't have the money to hold them to it. The people are going to vote what they want to vote, or what their constituents want them to vote. I think that solves some of that tyranny that we're getting out of our politicians.
All right, we want to, we're starting to come to a close here, but we still got some hands up. So I want to ask that you take just a minute to either ask your question or make your comment. Annette, and then John. Annette.
Okay. I loved what Nancy had said about needing to have time and budget restrictions on the candidates. My issue, as being neither a Republican or a Democrat, is that why are there only two freaking parties? What about the people who do not see themselves as one or the other? Where is our choice, and where is our equal common ground in this whole thing? The election, just in and of itself, the speakers of the House, the whole thing is so divisive in itself on having this party and this party, that this party does not get a voice, in my opinion. And I'm just wondering, how do we really balance out this, this idea of having the budget be fair and not having big money put into all these races, when the grassroots people may not really want to align with this one or that one, but because of the way the system is set up, they have to choose. Is that not divisive in itself?
Bill, I'm going to let you respond in 30 seconds because you've been active with the Tea Party.
Sure. I think what she just said is absolutely dead on right, because why are two parties controlling the committees and everything in Congress and in the Senate? What about the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, all these other parties? They have no voice when you have this control by these two parties. So yeah, I think that this process eviscerates the two parties' biggest strength, which is money to the politicians. And it makes it a more even playing field for all of the other parties out there too.
Great, I'm gonna go to, and unfortunately this will have to be our last one here. John. Go ahead and unmute yourself, John. There you go.
I'm so glad y'all brought this up at last. It's the duopoly. It's what one name for this monopoly of the Republicans and the Democrats is called. And one of the great resources that we have is that now nearly a third, or maybe in most cases, maybe a little over a third of us are unaffiliated. And we are becoming a larger bloc than either the Democrats or the Republicans. And it's a great value to us. And when someone earlier was talking about a nonpartisan commission to help deal with gerrymandering, one of the requirements should be that all the members of that commission should be unaffiliated voters. And if you want to real hone in on this, I refer you to goodthoughts.us. Remember that, goodthoughts.us. My son has prepared a is an attorney who's looked into this.
And just take 5 more seconds, John.
A soliloquy, I wanted to call it, on
Great.
the duopoly and its origins and what its abuses are.
All right, it's goodthoughts.us. You can check that out. Okay, we're going to do a final checkout here where you're going to get a chance to say what you're taking away from tonight. Want to just tell you here, this is We the People's Forum. This is about where everyday Americans get time at the podium. Bill and Rob, you know, they're not slick consultants. They're just regular folks. So this is what this is about. So if you've enjoyed this, you know, enjoyed the conversation, we're going to be having these about at least twice a month or so, usually Monday nights. If you, so be looking for announcements for that. And if you'd like to get involved in any way with this, you can email me. I'm dlap@braverangels.org. The perspective of this is regular people with a focus on working class people, really bringing their perspectives to the table. So again, I'm at dlap@braverangels.org if you're interested in helping with this. I want to tell you about our feedback form, which Apple has been putting in the chat. And Apple, I'll ask you to put that out again. The link to the feedback form, this is only our second time, our second public We the People's Forum. So we want your feedback so that we can continue to sharpen this, improve it, and make it better. So please, Apple's going to put that in the chat in just a minute. And please do fill that out, copy and paste it, and then fill it out after this forum is over. And then Jeff Metcalf, many people here are Brave Angels members. Some are here for the first time. Some might, you know, just received a couple of emails about Braver Angels, but you're a Braver Angels member. Tell us why you became a Braver Angels member, and what's your story here, Jeff? How'd you come to Braver Angels? Go ahead and unmute yourself, Jeff.
I'll tell you, and thank you for such a wonderful interaction. This is how we can do big things that make sense. You asked the question, David, what difference can I make? Well, long ago, that led me to studying the Constitution. And that led me to listening to Ben Shapiro throw the gauntlet down one time and say, look, if you really want to make a difference, then seek out Convention of States, which I did and joined and participated heartily. And in disillusion, left. But I left with the group that I had joined intact. They're the ones that steered me through term limits, US term limits, and then Braver Angels. And the reason I'm sharing that answers the questions or the statement I wanted to make for this lovely evening. Listen, why does it take so much money to do this? It's insane. The founders didn't get paid to do it. They rode a horse and they got elected. Well, I think that this is completely out of control, but it's only one symptom of a bigger, deeper problem, and the government's too big. How can we be $28 trillion in debt? Okay, so Braver Angels is a great way for us all to talk. People could get elected by just talking to each other like this. And like Bill said, if it was only, you could only spend 10 widgets to run for mayor of your city. Well, if I could get somebody to give me 10 widgets and I run, what if I win? Okay, well, that's how I can change things. Not by asking, you to do it, Dave. Here's $10. You go and change the world for me. It's up to me. So I really think that Braver Angels brings us together so we can do what we are meant to do. This is what I'm meant to do. And I found the forum where I can speak a little louder. Let's save the country.
Save the country. Well said. And Jeff is a part of the team helping to build We the People's Forum. Jeff is I think you're retired now, a retired trucker out there in California.
That's correct. Yep, I'm
And,
retired. I raised a family and I did all the things that we all want to do. And I thank God for it every day.
So join Jeff and thousands of others. Join, if you're not already a member, braverangels.org/join. All right, our checkout question. What are you taking away with you from this evening's conversation? What are you taking away with you from this evening's conversation? Just in a sentence, just raise your hand and say what you're taking away with you from this evening's conversation, and then we'll close this out. Don't forget that feedback form that we chatted there. Copy and paste that and fill that out at the end. But who wants to go first? Raise your hand. What are you taking with you from this conversation tonight? And I see your hand, John. Unmute yourself, John.
The rest of you are struggling with this just the same way I am. It's a real difficult problem when getting elected requires so much name recognition, and even a congressman has to represent 740,000 people. It's a big change from over the years.
Thank you, Jeff. Suzanne, did you have your hand up for this, or was that from, I think that might have been from a question, but feel free to, if you can hear, well, I guess they don't hear me. Annette, do you have your hand up for this? What are you taking away with you from this evening?
I didn't, but I am taking away that it was an excellent variety of viewpoints that still you can hear agreement for the most part that it's definitely got to change. And I'm coming away with even more hope that we are able to get to some sort of consensus as a people through conversation and not screaming at each other. So I'm happy about that. Thanks.
Len.
Well, in this conversation, more than any other one, perhaps, that I've seen in Braver Angels, I'm impressed how much people with different political leanings have in common. That's what I took away today, how much people have in common.
Bill Gretsch, you didn't get a chance to say your piece. Do you want to say what you're taking away with you from this evening's conversation?
Yeah, I put about 6 things in the chat. You can just look at them there. If you can get a hold of that and copy and paste.
Great, glad you could join us. I'm going to go to our two guests for tonight, Rob and Bill. What are you taking away with you from our conversation tonight? Rob, you first.
Well, you know what? I enjoy the reinforcement of presenting something which almost seems counterintuitive in our political environment today. I enjoy making a point, and I saw the same thing with Bill, and I see a whole bunch of heads. I don't know which ones out there are blue heads and which ones are red heads or in between heads, but you know what? It's just nice in this political environment to depoliticize. And so I just, I've missed this. We haven't done this. We haven't done this, at least I haven't done it for over a year. So I very much enjoyed this forum.
Bill, what are you taking away from this conversation tonight? You're muted, Bill.
Okay, now I can duck. I'm sure that there's reds and blues out there, and I see a lot of people all seeming to like the idea. We have good suggestions on other improvements. Whether they could be put into the same amendment, I don't know. But everybody seems to agree that we need to do something. We have a problem, and there isn't any color out there that can disagree with that. And that's what I'm taking away.
All right. And with that, we, the People's Forum, will end this and join us next time. And let's go out there and build a house united. Good night, everyone.